Over the years, I've brought you many examples of kiting in a battleship, but today I'll show you what happens when you identify the correct time to push in and then push. You can, in fact, get really rewarded for it. We're going to end up with a Kraken in this game. Sorry for the spoiler, but those of you who watch my streams probably have already seen this match. I think it happened not on the last stream, but on the stream before that, and I kind of forgot I had the footage laying around until I logged into the game last night to try to get a match in the newly buffed Henri IV and suffered nothing but tragic blowouts, unusable footage that I couldn't put on YouTube, but luckily I had this in my back pocket to show you today. And this is a pretty good game in the USS Wisconsin on the Two Brothers map. We're going to do a little bit of kiting, or it's going to look like that initially, but actually what we're doing is taking, let's say, a defensive posture. And then we'll identify the moment to push in, we'll take it, and we'll be rewarded. We've got Z46 pushing out ahead of us, laying a smoke screen for reasons unknown to me. Not exactly sure why friendly destroyers, or enemy destroyers for that matter, like to deploy their smoke screens so quickly. However, we spot a major threat to the Z46 in the form of the Des Moines, who is flat broadside to us, and because of that takes one citadel. Now, the Wisconsin, of course, has the unique gimmick of the infinite main battery reload booster, which is a very powerful consumable that allows you to punish mistakes like this. There's two additional citadels on the Des Moines, and at this point, there's only a couple shells needed to send him back to port as first blood. The shells are in the air, the accuracy looks questionable, but it's good enough to land too. There's the first blood medal, and there's the radar cruiser wiped off the map. He was a threat, potentially, in that position for our destroyer in the Alpha Cap, but now that he's back to port, he's no longer a threat, and theoretically, this Z46 is going to be able to take Alpha. Now, what do we do next? We have no intelligence data from the Z46, and we are spotted, so there's an enemy destroyer somewhere on this flank. Somebody spots the Minotaur, who's doing a similar thing to the Des Moines from earlier, sort of sitting broadside, not fully broadside, but broadside enough next to that island. The accuracy on the Wisconsin is not on point for that salvo, but we still do 8K. Z46 has found the Shima and chased him off a little bit. Hopefully that'll mean we don't have to worry about torpedoes just yet. But we notice the Carl Johann pushing in from the enemy's spawn cap. There's another battleship too, in the form of the FDG. Now they're coming from the center of the map going right, so we turn left, hopefully in order to keep their broadsides in our sights. We've got two cruisers in front of us who are undoubtedly going to be shot at by these battleships. We don't necessarily want that. But we also don't want to push directly into a Shimakaze, who at this point is probably headed back in this direction, as well as a Minotaur, a Carl Johann, and an FDG. Maybe if the Carl Johann didn't have torpedoes, we could be a little bit more aggressive at this point, but he does. And generally speaking, if you're going to be pushing into a battleship with torpedoes, you don't also want there to be a destroyer and a cruiser in the area that both also have torpedoes. That's a torpedo safari, and that's probably going to mean a quick return back to port. Carl Johann is behind the island, but he's not going to stop with his push. And he, somewhat like the Des Moines, is almost flat broadside to us. Big mistake, you don't want to give broadside to the USS Wisconsin of all things, especially in the Carl Johann. The armor on that thing, it might be thick, but it's thick enough to catch all the shells in its casemate secondary turret placements, and then arm them for big damage. Of course, sometimes you'll get small damage, like 338, when the target is almost sunk, but we pick up the kill. There's number 2. We've got the main battery reload booster going on, this time shooting at 2 separate targets. Second one being FDG, who ends up being our third kill of the game, and we're up to 100,000 damage in less than 5 minutes. That's the power of the USS Wisconsin. Now, it's only the Shimakaze and the Minotaur on this flank. Last time we saw him, Minotaur was on pretty low health. Looks like he still is, and he's got defense approaching him. The defense is perhaps pushing a little bit too early in this scenario. There is a battleship in the enemy cap, the Schlieffen. Now he's facing the Delta Cap, so he probably doesn't notice the defense yet. But if I remember correctly, defense is not going to be floating for that much longer. In any case, now would be the time to push. We've got a destroyer on this flank, or we did. Has he been sunk, the Z-46? I think he has been sunk, actually. I don't see... No, he's still in front of us on the minimap. So we've got him out there, able to sort of field torpedoes or scout torpedoes from the Shimakaze. He's going to be pushing forward along with our two cruisers, and so there's no reason for us not to push forward. We missed the Minotaur with that salvo there. He is a little bit dodgy, and he's acquired some more HP with his super British heel. Rear turret of Justice out, but Justice is not causing our shells to disperse very well. We miss once more. This guy continues to put the rudder port to starboard and dodge the shells, but that's a trick that's not going to work forever, theoretically. Maybe it'll work a third time, though. That salvo doesn't really look on point. Apparently it is, though. There's 3 penetrations on Minotaur. He's well on his way back to port. And if you take a look at the mini-map, we're going to have a gift in the form of the Schlieffen. He had initially pushed toward the, I think, Charlie Cap over there on the other side of the map that the blue team has taken, but found that it was too full of our teammates for him to fully commit, and now he's reversed back into his spawn cap. We're going to finish off this pesky Minotaur if it's the last thing we do. There's the salvo to take him down with another Citadel. That's 4 of them in this game, 121,000 damage, and there is our gift in the form of the Schlieffen. We've now caught him in a bit of a crossfire. He can't really push forward because of the battleship on our team in that cap. And now reversing is going to show his broadside to us. Of course, Shimakaze is still out there, still a bit of a threat. He hits us with a torpedo, but it's okay. He's behind us. And if we continue to push into the Schlieffen, then we won't have to worry about Shimakaze torpedoes, but we will have to worry about Schlieffen torpedoes, which is why you can see us engaging the rudder hard to port here. The Schlieffen torpedoes are already in the water, but, you know, if you zig and you zag enough, as you can predict the torpedoes coming toward you, oftentimes that's enough to dodge. You can't always zig and zag if you have to angle against enemy battleships, but it's just the Schlieffen left alive on the red team, and he's directly in front of us. So as long as we've got our bow pointed in that general direction, we're angled. And Schlieffen allows us to get our Kraken unleashed. 154,000 damage, 5 Citadels. Maybe not the most damage you've ever seen in World of Warships Legends, but highly efficient damage. Much of it coming from enemy cruisers in the form of the Des Moines and the Minotaur, who we did knock down their HP quite a bit. The Des Moines all at once, the Minotaur perhaps more gradually. And so even though the damage total is perhaps not that impressive, 154,000 damage is not bad by any stretch of the imagination, but it's not 200 or 200 plus thousand damage. What it is, though, is very useful damage. You could get 200,000 damage shooting at enemy battleships, but that's not as useful as taking down a radar cruiser like Des Moines or a light cruiser which potentially could have radar like the Minotaur. That's much more efficient use of the battleship's powers. The cruisers, especially the Des Moines, probably have more of an impact on the outcome of the battle than the enemy battleships do. And so when you're able to demolish one right off the bat with the use of the main battery reload booster, that does tend to set your team up for success. We actually get the assisted capture ribbon, too, in the Charlie cap, which will help increase our XP earnings. But now, it's just the Dalian and the Des Moines, or not the Des Moines, the Shimakaze, who was last spotted somewhere behind us. He still continues to chase us, but it's really not that big of a problem if you've got a destroyer behind you. Trying to torpedo a ship from behind is not necessarily a recipe for success. Torpedoing a ship in front of it, that's going to give you a better chance. The Dalian torpedoes are probably what we need to worry about, which is why we're sailing to port. That way, we've got this little rock between us and the Dalian, and it looks like he maybe hasn't launched torpedoes in this direction anyway. Seems like he's launched them in the direction of the friendly Vampire 2, which is certainly a choice. And it also seems like he's behind this rock, just where we can't get him. Somebody on our team seems to radar him. I guess we've got a radar cruiser behind us that I wasn't aware of. And we miss the shot on him because we're, I think, a little bit too worried about the torpedoes in this scenario. Honestly, I don't know why. There's no way we lose this game, so we might as well have just pushed straight into the smoke screen to see if we could get the six-pack. But hindsight is 2020. It doesn't matter now. We achieve a glorious victory on the Two Brothers map with the USS Wisconsin, that is. Kraken Unleashed, 3,225 base XP, and a decent victory with a decent example of not kiting, but actually going forward. Hope you enjoyed the battle. If so, give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.